I welcome you to Inovare. Yeah, this is where we innovate. This is the podcast where changes are made. If you're not growing, then you're dying. Innovation is the key to surviving. This is Inovare, where we ain't scared to make that change and create a new way. If you're ready to learn and sit back and just chill, it's about to get real. This is Inovare.
What's up, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Inovare Podcast. Got another great guest in this week for you. He is a life coach. He is a master NLP practitioner, a peak performance trainer. He is on a journey of internal progression that will help you get motivated, be responsible, believe every day. He's the host of the Majic for Life podcast, and he's here to talk about his journey to entrepreneurship, personal development, emotional mastery. That's a tough word for me, man. And a lifer mentality. Please welcome into the Inovare podcast, Michael A. Johnson. What's up, my man?
What's up? Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on, man. I appreciate it. First off, in that introduction there, we have a couple words that somebody listening might not be able to see the significance here, but we have responsible, which you have hyphenated as response-able. And then you have, what is the other one? Lifer. We have believe, which is be, live. So tell me a little bit about what you do, and I'm sure those are hyphenated on purpose.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's start with response-able. And this idea of being response-able is massively important. I found through the years of coaching and teaching and working with people that one of the biggest challenges that people face is the ability to respond. And I think that the word responsible, it's obviously hyphenated, like you said, for a reason. And the reason is to kind of jolt people out of the weightedness of the word. Oftentimes we think of our responsibilities and we think, gosh, oh, that's heavy. I have so many responsibilities. Yeah. And yet the idea and concept of being response-able really is the key to being able to start down a new path, a new journey, to being able to take in the information that's coming in from the outside and be able to understand that you get to decide what you're going to regurgitate it as. We have our filters that we use to take things in, and the stuff that comes back out from that is our responsibility, our ability to respond to the things going on around us. And this is where I see a lot of people having a rough time, and it's because we really didn't learn how to do this. We learned how to do math and science and history, and we learned how to do a lot of other really cool things, but we didn't actually get taught how to be response-able. And so it's a fun mission to be able to go after that and help people to understand that they can upgrade their internal operating systems so that they can start to be more response-able. It's not that we're supposed to be perfect, but just being able to be response-able is huge. And that progression really is what it's all about. I address my listeners and my tribe as lifers. And it's sort of a thing, we are lifers. When you become someone who wants to be on this journey of progression, of growth, when you start to realize that when you're not growing, you're dying, as your intro so lovely put, you start to get into this place where you're going, okay, you know what? I don't have to beat up on myself every day. There's lots of things I'm good at. Now it's time to find those things. And, when growth is king and contribution is the gold that you get from your spoils. This is really what it's all about. And being on that lifer journey is massively important. And then lastly, you noticed in there that I had believe hyphenated. Yeah. And it's really an interesting idea because it occurred to me, I was looking at it a while back, and I saw the word believe, and in working with so many people on trying to help them with their beliefs. And most of the time it's beliefs about themselves. It's what they believe they can and can't do that is either helping them to excel or helping them to decelerate through their life. And this idea of believe, I for some reason saw it in two different words and realized, oh, that's be live. It is be live. That idea is so important, is be live every day, and learning how to do that. Last year, I wrote a book and published a book called Every Minute. And it's about understanding how to be live in your moment. And when we start talking about past and future and present, it gets a little bit hard to deal with. But when you focus on being live, it's not necessarily about the present, because the minute you think about the present, it's gone. It's already past us. Yes. And so as we think about being live, it's about being in the moment, just in front of this, because this is gone. Mm-hmm. And it's gone instantly. And so being live is something that we strive for, as being a lifer. You know, you're looking to experience this world and these things that we're doing and be live in the moment. And that's hard to do, you know, because obviously we've got a plan for the future. We don't want to, avoid our responsibilities that we have to attain. And we don't want to not have goals, because those are, targets are good. But being in the moment and being live is huge.
Yeah. Dude, so and I want to get into your story. I always start off every show with me talking about a story, but I saw that and I knew I had to open with that. And so I'm a little derailed here to start, but I love that thought process. And one of the things that I was always told is an analogy that I love when we're talking about being present in the moment. So I've had this has been, so I have day by day tattooed on my shoulder for anybody who's friends with me. That was the first tattoo I got when I was 18 years old. And so I've always been in that carpe diem, live for the day, yeah. Tomorrow's not promised kind of a mindset. And one of the metaphors, analogies, I don't know the proper word for it, but is that if you're driving a car, for instance, what's larger? Is it the mirror, the car, or is it the mirror to see what's behind you, or is it the windshield of the car looking forward?
Love that.
It might be a little important to see what's behind you sometimes, right? But if you drove staring at the rearview mirror, you're going to get in an accident. You're not going to get to where you're going. You're going to get lost, And so I love that. Live in the moment. The past is what it is, right?
And it's a beautiful analogy, because the truth of the matter is when you're driving in your car, you're not focusing on what's in the car, mm-hmm. unless you have to. And those are the moments when you are in most danger of getting in an accident.
Yeah.
You're actually focusing on what's just in front of you.
Right.
And you're focusing a little bit on what's way farther out, and a very teeny little bit about where the exit is.
Right.
20 miles down the road. So we're focusing that way, and we know how, because of that driving metaphor. It makes perfect sense. Of course, we're going to focus on just in front of where we're going. And when we do that, we can have an experience in life that is really rewarding.
Absolutely. So now that we've talked a little bit about be live, we're just jumping right in here, man. But before we get too far down the road, because we got a lot of knowledge to drop today, tell me a little about your background and your road to entrepreneurship.
Well, it's a crazy journey. It's been super fun. I started doing ballroom dance when I was 5 years old, and that probably wasn't what you were expecting to hear. But I did start dancing when I was 5, and years on the maybe just not in my mind. It's a world, the competitive world. Worked through the rank at dance competitively. Got some championship on the way on the circuit. Examiner for exams and tests and certification. And myself one day at a competition, and it was probably the first comp I had ever danced at and I think I was 12 or 13 when I danced there for the first time. And sort of the beginning of my competitive journey. And I found myself judging that competition. And so I was reminiscing a lot and really reflecting back. And as I stood there judging some of the pros that were out dancing for me and trying to get the mark from me, I couldn't help but think, gosh, is this it? Is this really the peak of the mountain? Is this really where I was supposed to go? And, to have attained it at a young age. I mean, I'm fairly young comparatively, and I felt like, gosh, I got to the top of that mountain, and I'm standing here, and while this is great, and I'm not dogging it, it just really wasn't all I knew I could do and all I could contribute. And so, I spent a weekend of reflecting, because as a judge in that world, you spend your time either on the floor judging or in your hotel room by yourself. So not a whole lot of interaction. So a whole lot of time to reflect and look at where I was headed and what I was doing. And at that point, I realized, gosh, you know what? Along the way, I had to dig into personal development, because it was really mostly greedy. I was really at a place where I was just trying to get better myself. So I went in and started learning NLP and life coaching and all this stuff, because I was so bent on getting it right for myself and attaining the championships for myself, that, I got to this point and I look back and I went, gosh, I have all this stuff. I ought to use it and continue to use it on people and use it for good to help other people. So I pivoted and started going that direction and have been there ever since.
So you mentioned a couple things there. NLP. So let's start there. What is NLP?
NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and sort of the roots of my training. It's one of the things that I loved the most. NLP oftentimes gets grouped into this space of psychology. And so oftentimes when I listen to college kids, they'll go, yeah, I took a psychology class and they talked about NLP as being one form of psychology and method. And I'm like, well, actually, it's not one form or one method. It is the method. And what they don't understand, and what people oftentimes don't understand, is that the creators of NLP went around to the best therapists. They went to the best psychologists, psychiatrists. They went to the best hypnotists. They went to the best people in the world that were causing positive change with their clients, and they modeled them. And they said, great, what's working? How can we model it? And what does it have in common between all of you, so that we know what the actual triggers were? And they went and they took it from a very scientific academic approach. They figured out the processes. They figured out the things that all of those people had in common. And then they put them into processes that were repeatable and that people could use to help induce positive change for people. And so NLP is sort of the roots of a lot of the best trainers that they just don't talk about it often. When I first started, if I said I was doing NLP, it was like, oh my gosh, I might as well have been a leper. So really for a long time, it's been hidden behind the scenes. I mean, really, it was developed in 1975 by Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And since then, the likes of Tony Robbins have built billion-dollar empires off of the concepts and ideas and processes that come from NLP. And I just use him because he's somebody that everybody knows. However, you'd be surprised how many of the great influencers have been taught and trained in NLP. They just don't talk about it. Nowadays, it's easier to talk about it because it's a little more mainstream. People aren't freaked out about it. It's not as magical and voodoo-ish as it maybe seemed like in the early days. Nowadays, it's like, oh yeah, well, what do? You do NLP. What's it do? It gets results right now, not in 7 years after sitting on a couch. No offense, but I mean, it's basic idea.
Yeah, you could throw those. I mean, nobody's going to get anything done sitting on a couch, So speaking of not sitting on a couch, right? You went through this ballroom dance. And so did you study NLP while you were dancing, or was this?
Yeah.
Okay.
At about 3 years into my pro career, and I had a pretty successful amateur career leading up to my pro career. And about 3 years into my amateur career, or into my pro career, we were just not making any headway. I mean, we were great. I had won numerous accolades as an amateur. I was the top of the fishbowl, but then I moved into the pro ranks, and like so many pros do, you get into that space, and I was getting my butt kicked. And it seemed like I was getting my butt kicked in all areas, in my own work world, my personal world. The dancing wasn't coming together like it needed to. And so I had to find a way. And I found, actually, Tony Robbins was one of the first that I found way back in the day. And me being me, I went, he's not the first one that made that up. Wonder where he got it from. And so I started digging. and I found the roots of it back at Richard Bandler, John Grinder. And then from there, it was just, it was like a buffet of amazing people that have created and figured out some really cool things about how to, make positive change for people.
And so from that, did that help your dancing career, or was that kind of the transition into entrepreneurship?
No, that was really the thing that spurred on a ton of the things that I did in dance. Just to be able to attain the accolades that we did on the back end of our career. Like I said, we danced on the circuit for about 10 years, and after about that point, we started utilizing that stuff. And as we utilized it, more and more of the other dancers started coming to me, going, "Well, what are you doing? What's going on? Can you help us?" And so we started doing that more. And because I was trying to get certifications, because the programs that I wanted to be involved with were really, I was doing it for a selfish reason, but they insisted that, hey, if you want to get certified, you actually have to work with people. Imagine that. So I went ahead and did those certifications along the way, really with no intent back then to use it. And then later on, as I transitioned out of my pro career, went on to start my own business. I opened a brick and mortar studio. So I still have it to this day. I have my ballroom studio. It's sort of my playground, and it's a lot of fun to keep that element in my life because it's a passion that I had for so long. But, and that kind of spurred on that entrepreneur side of things. And the more I did that, the more I realized I had plenty to learn as a business owner.
Yeah. It's a different world between athletics and entrepreneurship. There's a ton of ties. And so I've talked about that at length with other guests, bridging the two gaps, between entrepreneur and athletics. But how did what you did on a daily basis, the preparation, those long nights in the hotel by yourself with just your mind sitting there, right?
Yeah.
How did all of that prepare you for entrepreneurship?
Well, the thing is that the lessons, and I think a lot of sports do this. You get the football players that are talking, they're like, all the stuff that I did made it possible for me to do this. You get things like your discipline and your hard work and your focus and your ability to really go after something that is difficult and challenging to attain. And all of those things, I always say dance is life, and people use that metaphor a lot. They go, well, it's the dance of life. In fact, on my book that I wrote, I called it Emotional Mastery Secrets for the Dance of Life. And that's because we're dancing every day. We are dancing through the ups and the downs and the challenges. And the stuff that I learned in dance really prepared me to be able to take on the ups and the downs, to be able to take on this space where I had to understand how to utilize my emotions and utilize the stuff that was the most important, which was how I emotionally moved through the world. Because in so many instances as a dancer, if you're not connecting with your audience, you're not going to do well. Well, in order to connect with your audience, you had to be very secure with yourself. You had to be very available and able to perform. And in order to perform at a high level, you had to be authentic. And this was the key, right? So learning and understanding how to be authentic through emotional intelligence was probably one of the biggest assets that I had coming from dance, because as I came into the business world and grew through this business world, I already understood how to be authentic. I understood how to utilize emotions and emotional intelligence. And in bringing that to the stage, more and more entrepreneurs are going, gosh, you got to tell me how to do that. I get on camera and I suck.
Yeah.
Like, how do I do that? Because I really believe in my thing, but every time I get on camera, people don't connect with me. Why not? And there's a performance element, not in a fake way, but in an authentic way. Because when you see a dancer, if they're not real, you don't want anything to do with them. If they're faking it, if it's a fake smile, then you're like, they're nasty. You don't want to watch them. But the ones that are real, you're like, I'm in. And so being able to bring out that authenticity and bring out people's superpowers in that regard, and then help them to believe in their superpowers is, you wouldn't think that it was needed as much as it is, but you'd be surprised how many business owners and entrepreneurs are in business right now, and they actually don't believe in what they're doing, but they're making money because their thing helps somebody, but they don't believe in what they're doing. And when I can bridge that gap, oh my gosh, they explode. And it's really amazing how that happens.
And so that bridging of the gap, you just referred to it as a superpower, and you've called it superpower in the past. So first, what is a superpower? And then how does somebody find their superpower?
Well, have you noticed that in today's day and era that we love superhero films? They're the ones that are the blockbusters. They're the ones that are knocking down the charts with success. And it's because people know that inside themselves there is something grander and greater than they have yet to accomplish or become. And because they know that, they go to these movies and they're inspired. They go, oh, if I could just swing from a building, then I would be amazing. And what we have to understand is that those are all metaphorical representations of these amazing superpowers that we have. And people go, well, I just don't have any superpowers. I don't do anything that's amazing. And the truth of the matter is I find some amazing superpowers from people that they just look at themselves and they go, well, there's nothing special about that. And I'm like, you don't understand. There are millions of people in the world that need to know that skill that you have. And you may think doing a spreadsheet and knowing the ins and outs of that spreadsheet are like, oh yeah, everybody can do it. But I was just on a call getting help from one of my statistician buddies, and he breezed through this spreadsheet that he had the most ridiculous skills I've ever seen on a spreadsheet. And there are people out there that are like that, and they think, that's nothing. What's the big deal? I just learned it. Anybody can learn it. And the truth is not anybody did learn it, and they knew it. They understood it. And that can be turned into a superpower, and it can be turned into something that could literally help millions of people. And people just need to be able to understand that and be able to mold it and bring it out of themselves. And sometimes it just takes somebody to help you do that.
And so how do I wrap my mind about what could potentially be that superpower?
Well, I think it's about first being able to identify some of the things that maybe you don't quite yet think are important. And that's the hard part, right? And that's why this idea of life coaching came about ages ago. Again, when I started, if you said you were a life coach, people would laugh you out the door. Nowadays, you go, yeah, do you have a life coach? If you don't, what are you doing? Like, how do you not? But being able to have a coach, if you were a basketball player, you would never have a basketball team without a coach. If you were in any sort of situation where there was a team setting, you have to have a coach. You have to have somebody that's going to guide you. Well, the most important place we could possibly need a coach would be in our life, because it really does help to have somebody on the other side going, you are amazing at that. Why aren't you using it? And you think, well, because that's not cool. That thing that I do is not cool. I've just always done it. And what's the big deal? And you're like, that is amazing.
Right.
And if you look at some of the stuff that has become the most successful in the world, that's really how it started. They went, well, I just took this thing I thought was not a big deal, and I turned it into something that was $1 billion business.
Yeah. That thinking, that understanding of a change, a new perspective on whatever it is. I think about, when you say that, I think about lacrosse. For me, it was lacrosse. And I always would go one way, do one thing, because that's just what I thought it was, what you had to do to score a goal, whatever it was, right? And then you have these coaches that come in and they're like, hey, man, that's always open. Look at this. And they show you, like, look how much is open if you just did this one thing, and it's kind of, it's eye-opening. It's mind-blowing to a sense where, and then you leave athletics, I wasn't as gifted as some of the other kids out there, right? And so then you're out in the world, and exactly what you're talking about, there are those things that in your everyday life where somebody else just looking into it could say, what are you doing? It's right here. It's right here in front of you. Look at the tape, It's right. And so that mindset and getting into that mindset of personal development, that's something that you really hone in on and that you really specialize in. And so what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis, or that you help people out with to help them get out of that rut of trying to do the same thing every day?
Well, personally, I do a number of things on a regular daily basis to continue to upgrade my own operating system. I feel like it is sort of become a moral obligation that I am on par and on track, because when somebody comes in front of me, I have to be prepared enough that I don't get in their box, because they're already there. They are already stuck per se. And so I have to be able to be on a different plane that goes, okay, now here we go. And they go, oh, I want to be in that space. And so we go and we try to get them in that space. So some of the things that I do on a regular basis, definitely have my evening routine and my morning routine. I have, my day scheduled to the amount that I like. If it was up to my COO, she would have me much more planned out to the minute. But for me, I have to have a little bit of, I like to have the ability to swerve, and I've had to learn how to deal with that in my day. So there are some things that I do in those routines that are huge. I'm a big fan of affirmations, but only if there is a good feeling to go with that affirmation. And I think that's where most people go wrong with affirmations, is that they think that by saying something over and over again that it'll actually make a difference. It's actually the feeling of it. The words actually are almost irrelevant. The words help, but the feeling of the affirmations is probably the most valuable element of it. So if you're feeling like crap and saying a positive affirmation, you almost are anchoring the negative feeling to the positive affirmation, and it actually is detrimental.
Interesting.
And so doing some of those affirmations is great if you can be in the great feeling state. One of the things I have as a reminder, I love little cards, and some people would see my desk as a mess. It's very much how I like it, but I have a card here that says, I am where I am. My only choice is a little better or a little worse. And that's it. And so, making a conscious choice every day to just make it a little better. If bad things happen, crap happens, that's part of our experience. It's part of what we need to go through to grow and learn and become better. But I can choose to make it a little worse, or I can choose to make it a little better. And so, I've just made a commitment to being able to make it a little better, always just a little better. I don't need to jump the Grand Canyon and be like, I'm ecstatic when everything just fell apart. But I can find something to make it a little better. That's not as hard.
Yeah. So I come from the software engineer world, and so I'm constantly working on application development and rollouts, and I love that you've talked about it, and you use that same analogy as it's just the next version of myself. It's an upgrade of myself. And so I always liken it to iOS applications, or if anybody, I feel like most people have an iPhone these days. And so in your newest update of your iPhone or Android phone, when you get that update, time to update, and you hit the update overnight, and you wake up and your phone is just a little different. Right? They haven't reinvented Apple, right? And it didn't happen overnight, but maybe now something's a little easier, a little better. And that's what we're talking about here. But instead of it being an application that we're using on our phone, it's ourselves. And it's getting ourselves 1% better. Or upgrading ourselves, our minds, our bodies, our spirits, whatever it is. We're upgrading that on a day-to-day basis. Or I use 2-week intervals. That's how I always plan it out.
Sure.
But it's that,
well,
it's that small little bit.
You can imagine if you had your phone, and I'll use my wife as an example. She has an update on her iPhone, and it's been there for weeks, maybe months, because she has no more space left, and she hasn't gotten her pictures and her videos off, so it won't update because there's not enough space. And the interesting thing about that is that now the phone is starting to operate poorly because she hasn't updated it. And I think that's to take your analogy and run with it, the problem for most humans is now they're living their life, they haven't upgraded their operating system ever, and now they're going, oh, why is this wrong, and I can't do this, and this is falling apart. And you're like, well, you know what, you've backlogged your operating system with all these memories, pictures, and videos in your mind that you play from the past, and you're backlogged living in that backspace. And like you said earlier, it's like driving your car on the freeway looking in the rearview mirror but never looking out of the front window. And so we have to be able to go back in and upgrade our operating system. And when we do, like you said, sometimes you do it and it's like, okay, you wake up the next morning and everything's just a little off.
Right.
Or when you get that new phone because you went, you know what, an upgrade on this system isn't going to be good. Let me just get the new system. So you go get that new and improved system. And now you're looking at it going, I have no idea how to use this phone. And that's what a lot of people do. They go to these big seminars or they go to these big things and they get all of it, bam. And then they come home and they go, I don't know how to use this phone. What do I do? And they get paralyzed. And so, you know, it's about doing a little bit of both. Sometimes you're ready to jump in and go headstrong. Sometimes you need it little bits at a time. And because of that, you know, there's a lot of cool ways to go about it now. You know, so immersion is great, and finding a new way to live is great.
Yeah, it's tempering your emotions, knowing when to hit the gas and when to hit the brakes. I struggle with that a lot myself. Is I'll have this new idea and I'll go, it's time to run. We got to run. Yeah. We got to go all in. And then, you know, that leads to burnout. That leads to, you know, maybe you didn't prepare enough. Maybe there's certain little things where you're staring at yourself and you're going, man, I ruined a good idea here by going about it the wrong way. So how do you temper those emotions? How do you temper that, you know, when to run, when to sprint, when to slow down?
I feel like I am going to border on the line of froofiness here, so just bear with me. But, you know, I do believe that it's about being happy. And I know that is so cliche and it's so overused. So just bear with me for a while. If you're out there in entrepreneur land and you're like, oh yeah, be happy. Michael just said to be happy. Well, you know what though? We don't practice it enough. And what we do is we rely back on things like Netflix, or we rely back on things like food or, you know, vices. Unfortunately, a lot of people fall back on things like alcohol that isn't sustainable for our bodies. And, you know, being able to teach ourselves how to be happy is probably one of the more difficult challenges. And yet when you get good at it, you can start to do it all the time. And so things like burnout don't come into play when you understand, because what you'll start to realize is when things go poorly or when you start to feel bad, you recognize it earlier and you actually go, let's pause for a minute, because this conversation or this meeting or this direction is starting to go down a path that doesn't feel good. And I'm not going to go there and try to create something amazing over here while trying to be over there. And so it's really easy when you get some good systems in place, and it's really practical when you get some good systems in place and you understand how to manage your emotions, realize that they're there as a guidance system, right? A GPS, so to speak. And it's not that you shouldn't feel bad ever, because that would be ridiculous. Then you wouldn't know what you wanted. And so you go in and you figure out how to identify those moments when things are starting to go poorly. And then you have systems and processes that you've set up ahead of time to actually go, hey, you know what? I can feel that's going the wrong direction. Let's go work on making it a little better instead of making it a little worse. And so those are the things that we really want to lean into, is leaning into being happy. And when I say happy, there's a lot of emotions and the light side of things that go into happy. It's not always just like Disneyland, you know, and that's not the solution. But I would call it, maybe in my most recent book, I called it light side emotions, dark side emotions, not good or bad. They're all useful. Right. So we look at it and we go, well, how can I get myself to light side emotion? Well, you know, happy can mean a lot of different things, but you know, how can I be just a little more hopeful instead of a little more, Okay. Well, how can I be a little bit more grateful than hopeful? Well, how can I be a little bit more appreciative from grateful? And you work through that progression as best you can. And that really is what it's about. And if we can find and create the systems ahead of time, then when those moments that go wrong happen, you're prepared. Right now, most people, when things go wrong, whatever comes out is what comes out, and then they're left with the consequences of picking it up, and it gets harder on that side of the coin.
I love it, man. I love it. And so how can somebody who's listening to you here today, how can somebody get in touch with you and learn more?
Oh, piece of cake. I have the Majic for Life podcast, as you can see, Majic for Life. It's spelled with a J, so you'll be able to find it easy because, well, don't forget Google tries to autocorrect it to G, and then you're going to get card tricks, and that's not what we're about. So go to the Majic for Life podcast. You can find us at magicforlife.com. You can check out my new book from this at Every Minute. We're talking about being in the moment, right? Like we talked about today, and that's at everyminutebook.com. And those are just some easy ways. You can find me on Facebook. We have a great group. If you're an entrepreneur and you're interested in being part of our group, you can come join us. And if you're the right fit, we'll talk about getting into the group. We only let entrepreneurs that are in the right space get in. So we're a very tight-knit group of lifers. And we'd love to have you if you feel like you're a good fit for us.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Great advice. I knew that this was going to be just an amazing conversation. When we had first connected, it was just like, this is it. We're going to have such a cool conversation, and people are going to love it. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. And take care, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and all your hard work. Keep it up. And I know a lot of people are having their worlds change by the work you're doing. So keep it up.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Well, guys, I know you loved this episode because Michael is awesome. So if you want to check out this episode, you want to check it out on your iTunes, your Spotify, wherever it is, hey, we're there. We're on all those platforms. In fact, we're on 8 different platforms. You can also check us out on our Facebook Live events, which you're watching right now, and you can watch any of the previous recordings on our YouTube. We also have a private Facebook group of entrepreneurs. Go ahead and check that out. Search Inovare Mindset. That's Inovare Mindset, and you can join our private group of entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Guys, until next time, see you.